Hello listeners, my name is Mahat Palle, a 10th grader at Chantilly High School in Miss McDowell's AP World History class. For today's podcast, I will be analyzing the movie Viceroy's House. Before analyzing the movie and sharing my personal viewpoints about the events that took place in the movie, I will give some background information about Viceroy's House. Viceroy's House is a 2017 British Indian historical drama film. Viceroy's House starts off with a light, airy tone before descending into a romantic melodrama partnered with a dangerous ticking clock of civil upheaval in a time of uncertainty. The director Gurinder Chadha presents this film exposing the underbelly and human-scale strategies of a monumental moment. Chadha also deftly packages this story into something easily swallowed and understood, eluding the messier details. The movie is remarkable in a way where a vital piece of history is presented. Chadha, who wrote the movie herself, is of Indian descent. Through her perspective, she focused on the legacy of those events on a personal level which reverberate throughout the India of today. Viceroy's House reflects on the deafening events of partition when the country was split into two separate nations, India with a majority of Hindu population and Pakistan with a majority Muslim population. Partition was a monumental moment in India and Pakistani history as it led to the displacement of more than 10 million people and mass carnage which resulted in violence. The last viceroy, Lord Louis Mountbatten, was sent to India to hand back power. He had been vilified for the partition and the catastrophic consequences. There was without any doubt lots of fighting and massacres during the partition, but the evidence suggests that a lot of this was orchestrated as a part of the divide and rule policy of the British at the time. The new evidence and research suggests that the plans for partition had actually already been discussed back when Winston Churchill was Prime Minister during the years of 1940 to 1945, long before Mountbatten had even been named or arrived in India. There was much bigger geopolitical issues at play in the post-war climate. In 1945, Britain had announced its plans to withdraw from India, partly in return for the country supporting the Allies in the Second World War. It claims that in an unwanted partition plan drawn up by Churchill, Pakistan was conjured out of thin air solely to provide access to Middle Eastern oil for the scheming of the British and to ensure that Russia did not get its hands on the port of Karachi. With U.S. foreign policy pressurizing the end of Western imperialism, it seemed only a matter of time before India was gained its freedom. I believe that the intended audience for the movie is a younger generation because the movie would help them understand the world history. The historical facts that were emphasized were that a lot of young people didn't know that there was a British Empire in India. The East India Company first traveled to the Indian subcontinent in the early 17th century, so the relationship between Britain and India goes back 400 years. I also believe that the bias presented in the movie were about the profound inferiority complex that plagues colonized people. It was that the British were greater than the Indians and that one religion prevails over another. The director describes herself as a British Indian filmmaker who was born in Kenya, but her family actually hail from Rawalpindi and Jhelum in what became Pakistan. She described these cities as ending up on the wrong side. But after partition and this kind of bias and perspective, it's coming from the director's religion. In the film, all the riots seem to be caused by Muslims. Riots in the Punjab interrupt the Mountbattens at a party and, though the disruption is delivered breathlessly, they still announce that they have been carried out by Muslims. In the film, Sikh valet, who spends the whole film fighting his countrymen instead of his occupiers, leaves to check on his village in the Punjab, only to return dusty and disheveled. It is portrayed as the entire village was burned to the ground by Muslims who, in this film, are always the perpetrators of violence, never its victims. Another interesting bias that was portrayed was about communal violence between Hindus and Muslims. It is spoken by the Mountbattens and other Raj imperialists as though it were a cyclone arriving in India from some unknown providence, moved by an unknowable science. Divide and rule, a staple of British colonial administration, is given no credence. The director via Raj intercolors informs that the audience that 300 million Hindus and Sikhs want a united India, but it is 100 million Muslims who do not, mirroring the fractures of modern nationalism wrought by India's partition. The director seems to take pleasure in laying the bloodshed and brutality of 1947 at the feet of two particular villains, Muslims and Jinnah. To begin at the very end, the closing credits of Viceroy's house bear a detailed dedication to a woman who survived the devastating upheaval of the 1947 partition of India. She was forced to trek a vast distance from her home to her newly founded Muslim Republic of Pakistan, and was finally reunited with her eventual husband in a refugee camp. Overall, this movie is an educational, melodramatic, historical refresher course on the partition of India on the 70th anniversary of Indian independence. This movie is politically relevant to modern audience as it talks about religious divides and prejudice. Thank you for listening about my podcast on the movie Viceroy's House. Thank you.